our committee was formed, 4 years ago, January of 22. Just prior to that, in September of 21, the Groton Business Association had a working group that looked at, with Groton Hill Music coming to town, and what does that mean for the future? How do we embrace the inevitability and make it work? We wrote a report and made 2 recommendations to the select board. One was to hire a full-time economic development professional, and the other was to create a committee, the Destination-Groton Committee. So in January of 2022, the select board appointed this committee. It's composed of myself as chair, Craig Sheldon, Jeff Gordon as vice chair, Joni Parker Roach, Karen Tucker Barrisano is here, and 2 members are not here. One is at home with her 2-year-old daughter, and the other is on a plane to Ireland. So we've been working every week. We have a meeting. It's open to the public. We publish background and minutes, and we've been very busy. So we indicate that success will occur on this opportunity, this visioning session we're going through. This is the first public meeting. The second, we're going to have 3 more in October 1st, 8th, and 15th. So we want lots of input from the town. We're going to be moving around the town. This meeting is here. The second meeting will be here. The third will be at Groton Wood, and the fourth at Prescott. So we believe that success will only occur if there is townwide public support and the marketplace responds to the opportunity the vision holds. While no one can predict the timing, we believe several components of this vision would be phased in over the next 10 years or more, so nothing's going to happen overnight. In recent years, the arrival of Groton Hill Music and the reopening of the Groton Inn has brought Groton's reputation as a destination location to a new level. A group formed by the GBA, as I mentioned, wrote a report in 2020 which led to the appointment of the Destination-Groton Committee, and we've been tracking the challenges and opportunities that the report represented. To date, the committee has conducted a series of town business forums, focus groups, and the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission conducted 12 interviews of people on Main Street and around town. And we've posted in the past since 2023, 4, and I think it ended in 24, a public survey with 400 respondents. We held 2 business meetings that we had over 90 attendees at each of the meetings. The first one was in April 12th to 24, and it was based on what? No. So the first one was in April of 24, and it looked at economic growth opportunities in the town. And in November that year, we had an Envisioning the Future of Town Center. Now let me take just a moment and explain that we were awarded 2 state grants to look at the potential development of a rural community. And we got 2 awards. One was a $50,000 grant, and the other is a $25,000 grant to look at the economic potential and envisioning the future. Now, primarily, it was written and under the auspices of the one-stop development at the state level to look at town center. We've received input and feedback from some people in town, including members of the planning board, that we shouldn't just be focused on town center. So we're looking at other pads around town that a developer may go and say, we can build a nice shop at Four Corners or at the CVS Plaza. or in West Groton. So while we have to stick within a certain perspective, we're also engaging with members from the surrounding communities to help us think about those other paths. As I mentioned, we had a survey with 400 respondents. 83% support a 10-year effort to secure funding to address both infrastructure challenges as well as economic opportunities while preserving the town we all love. Interestingly, there are 2 economic studies that have occurred in the last year. One through the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. They granted us, they did the study on our behalf. And the second one was done by a consulting group, an economic consulting group called FXM, which was the consultant on the economy for the master plan. So the planning board hired them. They each came back with findings that approximately $60 million is being spent out of town and $77 million. In economic theory, up to a third is potential, and I underscore potential, to redirect back into town. So again, nothing hard and fast other than, in theory, since X amount is going out of town, you could expect to attract perhaps as much as 30% back. So we translate that into about $20 million to $25 million that could come back into the town and to help create a revenue stream. FXM interpreted those numbers, and they came up with with the citing that as much as 37,000 square feet or as many as 12 new stores, in theory, could be in our future. Vision comes with traffic mitigation strategies and infrastructure improvements. We basically went to the 2 consultants that I'll be introducing shortly and said, on the traffic side, look at the current numbers of accidents and challenges, projected out 10 years. How can we come up with a strategy to identify some mitigating strategies and some funding sources? Yeah, it's important to note that our focus is on shared goals, preserving Groton's character through small-scale, village-style development, not strip mall or big box stores. The vision process, it's a collaborative effort to imagine and define a community's long-term aspirations for a specific area. The visioning process provides clarity and inspiration. Developers understand the kind of projects that the community will welcome, and entrepreneurs will see an opportunity. The vision process. This process is at the beginning of a town-wide conversation. It is not a finished product. This vision process aligns with the master plan and builds on Groton's civic pride. The outcome is to serve both residents and visitors alike through the traffic mitigation and public safety measures, and to benefit town taxpayers from a potential increased revenue stream. You'll note that I believe the room tax and meals tax last year produced roughly $400,000 for the town. We think that that revenue stream could be increased in the coming years. The end product is to submit a final 10-year vision to create a viable, walkable town center experience. Reference material, there's some in your folder that articulates some of the findings from the surveys taken and the interviews, and so you can begin to see people's ideas. All this reference material, and there's 18 different documents on our website. So if you go to destination.com/vision process, you'll see the level of work that's gone into understanding how to frame this, how to think about improving the economic future. Our next steps, We've begun by engaging with the Select Board, the Planning Board, and tonight other town committee partners in a comprehensive community-led town center visioning process. Step 2, engage with town residents in 3 upcoming public conversation forums in October. Step 3, conduct a second online resident survey to extend the visioning conversation. Step 4, synthesize all the information gathered into a final vision plan with findings and recommendations to be presented to the town manager, select board, and the public. With a sense of purpose and humility, we state, let the conversation continue. Let me now introduce our next speaker. Michael Clark is a planner with Stantec, which is a noted Boston-based planning firm. We said to Michael, again, if you can pull together the research, there's a lot of research out there on traffic conditions, infrastructure challenges, signage, wayfinding, all kinds of issues. Pull them together and come up with a matrix on some solutions. But don't pick a winner. We're not trying to get you to say, you must do this. It's all open, but based on research, we want to present that to you tonight and then get your input and feedback. So Michael, if you would take it away.
Is this good? Great. I'm going to stand. And Jeff, if you want to advance to the next slide, thank you for that introduction, Greg. As Greg had mentioned, this effort came out of a small planning grant from the Massachusetts Development Initiative, which is part of the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. We do these types of projects with communities throughout the Commonwealth. And this one particularly was looking at the town-owned stretch of Main Street. Outside of this study area, most of the stretch is actually owned by the state, but this part of Main Street is actually owned by the town. So there are many opportunities for the town to introduce projects and introduce other initiatives along this stretch of the corridor. So as part of our effort over the last several months, we first put together some content that looked at how travel was currently flowing along this stretch of Main Street, and then put together some best practice solutions, general potential mobility solutions, evaluated these together, and touched on an implementation plan. So we'll be talking about especially the evaluation and some of those best practice concepts throughout this presentation, if you want to advance. Our goals for this, we've been working pretty closely with Destination-Groton. We had a kickoff meeting that introduced some of these goals of identifying the current problems in Groton's transportation network and infrastructure, improving safety and connectivity of the transportation network in downtown and infrastructure through best practice solutions, increasing sustainability by providing alternatives to driving, improving the resiliency of the infrastructure in the downtown area, and supporting sustainable growth, touching on many of the economic development points that Greg just spoke to. These goals are consistent, especially with the walkability report from MRPC from this past year, which we found to be a very valuable resource in this effort, as well as from the recent master plan for the town of Groton. Next slide. We've been out here before. We had a round of engagement back in March 1st with various members of Town Hall and various committee members, as well as with merchant groups. We got a lot of great feedback about how people feel Main Street functions today. I'll hit on some of these top points here. There's a general sentiment that Main Street acts as a cut-through to Route 495 from nearby towns, a perception of heavy truck traffic and speeding on Main Street, a failure to lead to pedestrians. That is a primary concern of the police department, and that is particularly problematic here because of the influence of Lawrence Academy, and the presence of school children really elevates the need for pedestrian safety. The day we were out here was actually an early release day for Groton Public Schools, so it was pretty instructive for us to see lots of school-aged children walking about in the afternoon and how they were navigating the street and crossing it to and from. Next slide. So let's dive into some of our existing conditions analysis. This slide is looking at flow data along Main Street. This is using data from a MassDOT traffic count, which was conducted just west of the Lowell Road intersection. Counted about 20,000 vehicles along this portion of the corridor, which is actually fairly robust for a downtown corridor like Main Street is through a downtown like Groton. That's a high number, so the perception that there's a lot of traffic along the roadway is borne out by the data. This was from September of 2023 on a Thursday, over a course of a day. And what this flow data is representing is we used a location-based service called Replica, which basically takes the devices that we all carry on us and is able to, in an anonymized way, track the origin and destination of where those devices are going to and from. So we're able to kind of understand where these turn movements are happening along Main Street. And you can see some of the lighter thickness of lines for some of these flows to and from Main Street would say Lowell and Hollis as particular entry and exit points from Main Street. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes.
You say you track the devices that all of us carry. You're playing cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
Do you distinguish between drivers and passengers?
It is able to distinguish between if you're in a moving car versus a pedestrian versus a bicycle and your speed of travel.
Passengers in the car, does it distinguish between?
No, so this is showing vehicles, so it's only able to show vehicles.
So those numbers are actually cell phones passing through the car.
The numbers are MassDOT traffic counts, and the actual cell phone device numbers are different from that because they're devices, they're not vehicles, so we calibrated this to show vehicles. Mm-hmm.
If you total one direction versus the other, how do you account for that?
It might be a data entry issue. It might be replica numbers not exactly matching.
If you look at just add it up, so the 5 one way and 25 the other, so it's a 7,000 vehicle difference.
Are you talking about the direction of travel? Yeah, that's from the MassDOT data, so it is showing that there's more traffic going west than there is going east.
How does that make sense? I mean, you would think if somebody went one way, they'd come back again. I guess I'm just.
Not necessarily. It's not what the count data is showing. Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense because people in the morning are probably able to go in, and then in the afternoon, they'll probably take you to or some other avenue to get back. Let's say breakfast hours or
Mm-hmm.
So there's all sorts of different ways. When I was commuting, I would do the same thing. I would just go a different way back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the more
Run some errands on the way home.
Well, it also is just traffic, avoiding traffic snarl. And driving, there may be a reason why people are using other ways to get in and do that.
Yeah, that might be the case. Yes.
Another reason why the numbers don't match is because people take different routes from that sense. So some might have trailed off.
That's a great point. Yeah, this isn't accounting for if you're turning into a business and ending your trip or taking any of these other side streets. Yeah, it won't be a perfect representation. If you want to advance, Jeff, because using this data, and I think this is a pretty powerful finding from this effort, because we have that origin and destination data, we're able to kind of understand how many of those devices that are coming through Main Street are actually starting their trip in Groton or ending their trip in Groton. Not necessarily on Main Street itself, but just in the town as a whole. And we found that in the southbound or eastbound direction, about 60% of these trips were simply passing through the community. They weren't starting here, they weren't ending here, they were simply passing through. So this kind of speaks to Main Street through the downtown area as being one where a slight majority of the vehicles that are observed on it aren't interacting with the town in any way, let alone Main Street businesses and whatnot, but the town as a whole. It is a pass-through street. And the next slide shows that these numbers are slightly lower in the other direction, in the northbound or the westbound direction. But similar, kind of the similar point still holds that a lot of these vehicles just aren't associated with the town in terms of their origins or destinations. So if you want to advance, we also want to highlight the lane widths along Main Street right now. We're showing about a 12-foot lane width typically in a single lane of travel, either in the eastbound or the westbound direction. The actual experience as you drive or walk along Main Street might be that these lanes are actually wider, and that's simply because there's not pavement marking in many places that denote street parking. And this is a fairly key finding because a 12-foot travel lane is fairly wide. By MassDOT standards, that is more fitting for a 45 or 50 mile per hour roadway, not a 25 or 30 mile per hour roadway like you might want here on Main Street. We would recommend something more like a 10-foot travel lane for a pretty dense downtown setting like this. And this bears out somewhat in the crash data that we tabulated, as well as the speed data, which also came from those MassDOT counts. I think very fortunately, the 5 years of data that we had from 2019 to 2024 only indicated minor injury crash severity along Main Street. I think it is somewhat fortunate that there has not been a more serious accident in the last 5 or 6 years, unless this data is not capturing something that it should have. And the speeds along Main Street in that bottom right-hand corner, during some of the free flow travel times early in the morning or in the evening, we're seeing about 20% of vehicle traffic go over 30 miles per hour. And certainly during some other down times of the day, we would expect, a fairly decent number of vehicles to be traveling at an unhealthy rate of speed in a setting like this. And that's important because at 30 miles per hour, that's something of an inflection point. If you're a pedestrian and you're struck by a vehicle going that fast, that's about 50% chance of severe injury, if not a fatality, if you're a pedestrian. And I'm sure the last thing that merchants today along Main Street want to be thinking about or want their customers to be thinking about is Main Street as an unsafe place to walk around because the vehicles are traveling too fast. Next slide. This slide is showing the distance between different pedestrian crossings along Main Street, as well as a sample of some of the crossing distances of Main Street itself. Anything in red here is showing that there's more than 300 feet between crossing distances, which basically says if I want to cross somewhere within the middle of this arrow, I have to go relatively out of my way to find a crosswalk to do that. And as I'm sure we all know from experience, oftentimes we're not going out of our way to find that crossing. We're just walking across the street, maybe at a location where the street isn't well designed to accommodate a crossing like that, and where a driver might not be expecting to see a pedestrian there. And speaking back to those wide travel lanes, we have total curb-to-curb right-of-ways that can vary from 34 feet by the Academy to as much as 52 feet along some portions of Main Street. That's a pretty wide crossing distance. It takes time to cross the street, especially if you have a mobility impairment of some sort and you're trusting vehicles to stop and be patient for that to happen. Next slide. The last point that I want to make about pedestrian conditions and some of the baseline conditions along Main Street today are the high number of curb cuts. I think the bottom right-hand picture is instructive. The Groton House of Pizza, Dunkin' Donuts, sorry that I'm forgetting the name of the other businesses along this, in this building here, but the combination of the driveway down to the back of the building as well as the driveway into the angled parking in front of the building, that's a pretty far, wide crossing distance for pedestrians to navigate. That is looking at 50, 60 feet potentially, whereas best practice would be for a two-lane in and out access closer to 24 or 25 feet. What that means is that as a pedestrian, I'm exposing myself to the risk of vehicles turning into and out of that driveway over a greater distance. And that also when you have a driveway of that great of a distance, if you're a car going in, it's very easy for you to just simply glide into the intersection at the rate of speed that you might already be going instead of stopping, turning, and being forced to see whether pedestrians are present. So with all of this, we grouped our potential solution concepts into 3 categories. Go over the multimodal travel ones now. We have vehicle throughput as well as economic vitality solutions as well. So this is just a quick map that shows some of these challenges that were observed along the study area corridor. Absence of crosswalks at different locations, the wide travel lanes encouraging speeding. Sorry that some of the captions got cut off on the bottom there, but that wide curb cut, that was from the MRPC walkability audit from last year. I like that picture. The influence of heavy trucks along Main Street, and then moving on the left-hand side of the screen here, some of the outdated infrastructure. That is a fairly outdated pedestrian crossing indicator along Main Street right now, as well as excessive distances between crossings. And with all that, we proposed a number of different solution concepts. And I do want to stress that these are concepts. Our scope for this doesn't allow us to dive into, you should do this here, you should do that there. As Greg noted, this is sort of an introductory presentation to the types of solutions, mobility solutions that could be put forward on Main Street itself. There's certainly a number of fairly nuanced design questions that would come with implementation of any one of these concepts on the slide, or that I'll talk through in subsequent slides. This is really just trying to introduce the idea of these concepts for discussion as the town begins its navigation of this process. On the left-hand side of the screen, looking at lane width reduction, this is simply trying to reduce those 12-foot travel lanes to ideally 10 feet. You can have heavy truck traffic on 10-foot travel lanes. You might get some pushback that it should be 11 feet, but you can do it with 10 feet. How you handle that extra pavement is another question entirely. It could be simply painted lines to better indicate those 10-foot travel lanes or a smaller travel lane. It could be a more involved engineering project that might, move the curbs in or introduce a raised median or something like that. We're not scoped to get into that level of detail here. It is simply looking at reducing the typical lane width along Main Street. Curb bump outs in the middle of the screen here. This is simply saying a crosswalk doesn't start at the sidewalk. It starts somewhere in the street itself by providing some landscaping that extends the sidewalk 8 to 10 feet into the street. It might reduce the availability or the presence of some on-street parking, but this is a favorite solution for many downtown areas, just to simply shorten those crossing distances for pedestrians, bring it up to any ADA improvements that are needed, because you need to reconstruct the crosswalk, so you can introduce these improvements as well. And it really does a great job at making pedestrians more visible to drivers who might not be able to look at the sidewalk as they're driving by, but if a pedestrian is a little more out into the roadway area, there's just a better vision line for them to see that. High visibility crosswalks is looking at signage, looking at specific pavement types that just better denote the presence of crosswalks, bringing some of the lighting up to a current best practice. Yep.
I'm sorry, you wouldn't get into this or getting to this. Have you considered raising crosswalks? So rather than having a pedestrian step off the curb and down to the street level, thank you. Rather than having a pedestrian step off a curb, going down to the street level, which is where the vehicles are, have the vehicles, as they come to a crosswalk, hit a speed bump, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, have it flat. But this indicates to the drivers that you're entering a pedestrian area, not the pedestrians entering a vehicle area. I'm very minor bias. I'm against further lowering the speed limits. I know that a little pushback, that's my personal peeve. But one way to indicate to all these vehicle drivers, you come to a crosswalk, whether you see a flashing light, whether you see the painted strips, you're going to know you're entering a pedestrian area. You're leaving the street, a vehicle area, you're entering a pedestrian area. Mm-hmm. So just a comment.
Personally, I love that. We thought about it. It didn't, I guess you could say, make the cut for one of the improvement concepts that we profiled here. But I think the concern with that would just be the impact on congestion, especially at peak travel times, and the appetite for the community to have that, but that is me talking at a very introductory stage about something. I can't say that that actually would be the case here. So I think it's something that I would encourage the community to evaluate. That too, yeah.
They go over just fine.
If you want to advance, oh, sorry, the last one there was curb cut narrowing and consolidations is simply trying to reduce the number of curb cuts from, in this graphic here, it's showing 3 to 1. This would be a very targeted type of improvement. It requires a lot of coordination with the property owners themselves to agree to something like that. We'll kind of speak to a solution concept in a little bit that kind of looks at that in practice, but just the idea of reducing the number of curb cuts and the number of access points for vehicles turning in and out and conflicting with pedestrians on the sidewalks or bicyclists on the street is something to consider.
Following up on the gentleman there, I was waiting eager to finish the slides, but yeah, I'll note, I don't see mention of so-called traffic calming measures of any sort. Raised crosswalks are one, rumble strips are another, center rumble strips are a third that I would urge you to consider. I was just in Skaneateles, New York, very nice town. We would probably like to turn out like that. Some people would like that. It heavily features all three of those. So the traffic is alerted that they're entering a thickly settled district and a pedestrian zone, and there are tactile and audible reminders when vehicles approach a crosswalk.
Yeah, and we would certainly encourage that. I would hope that some of these measures, especially the lane width reduction, just kind of introducing that friction in the roadway when you're a driver that this is a place that I need to slow down, speaks to that. The next slide actually does list at the bottom of the screen, there are a number of other potential ideas that could be implemented here that are of the traffic calming variety, raised crosswalks, crossing islands, things of that nature that we would certainly encourage the town to continue to consider moving forward.
Hi. I was wondering, I noticed two things that would need to be addressed. First is bicycles are pretty much forced to use the sidewalks, and now with the new mass laws about class 2, they're not even allowed on sidewalks. They never really were, but now they're really emphasizing that people with electric bikes are not, e-bikes are not allowed on sidewalks at all. So there would be need to accommodate bicycle passage in a safe manner. And secondly, I noticed when people are driving down the road and they want to make a left turn, there are people, because it's wide enough, people just go around them on the right.
Yeah.
And that happens all over the place, and there's parked vehicles, and if pedestrians are trying to cross, you have sometimes two sets of vehicles, one passing the other on a turn. And I think that needs to be addressed in some
Yep.
way.
Yeah, we think so too.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in fact, people have hit cars parked on the side because they're trying to get around a car, especially like 40, where 40 comes off there. People are trying to take that left.
Yeah, no,
And
absolutely
there's
agree.
other places too, obviously.
And we'll actually feature something like that in a slide. Yes, the gentleman next to you, yeah.
Thank you. My question is pretty simple. How much control does this town of Groton have over a state highway here?
This is,
It's not a state highway down Main Street. Thank you. That was all.
Complete control. Thank you. Question, I see bike comfort, lane widths +1, so I think what you're saying, if we were to reduce the lane widths, that would be a positive for bike comfort?
yeah, and lane width is kind of tricky to evaluate, and we'll have this larger evaluation matrix, I believe it's in the handout as well, up on the slide in a little bit, to kind of look at everything in context with one another. But with lane widths, the idea of if you're reducing lane widths from 12 feet to 10 feet, you're introducing some amount of additional new programmable space within the roadway. And
I
you
would-
have the ability to potentially accommodate bicycle lanes as part of that solution.
As somebody who regularly bikes and drives down Hollis Street and Main Street, Hollis Street terrifies me because it's narrow and everyone tries to pass me. Main Street is actually fantastic to ride down. It's nice and wide. You don't have to worry as much about
people opening up their doors because you have enough space and so forth. So I think any restriction on that would be very dangerous because people probably wouldn't slow down anyway.
Yeah, I think what we want to be mindful though with that evaluation is who is biking on Main Street now. Is it folks who feel very comfortable and confident on the bicycle, or is it folks who might go out with their children a few times a year? Do they really want to be on Main Street? And do we want to create an environment that allows that type of user to more regularly, say, bike to and from a business on Main Street? That's what we're really kind of getting at with the bicycle accommodations. We don't have it as a concept for evaluation as part of this effort, but we would want it to be looked at as part of any follow-on effort that stems from this. Yes.
Yeah, I would just say about the bike lanes, that is something I'm a member of the Complete Street Committee, and that's something we're actually looking at. But we have two communities adjacent to us, Ayer and Shirley, that actually have bike lanes through the center. And if people want to get an idea of the impact of the bike lanes on those, on those towns, I would suggest going over and looking at it, because it has, it makes the biking a little bit safer because you're in a sort of a designated area. It also, I think, calms and slows the traffic a little bit in those communities. So it's worth checking out.
So we have another couple of sort of solution categories here. And like I mentioned, we'll have this evaluation matrix up in a little bit as well at the end. Jeff, if you want to advance. The next sort of concepts here are looking at vehicle throughput. So I'm going to start from the top right-hand corner here and go clockwise. We didn't have a slide on it, but there's poor operations from side streets because there's no stop signs or signals or anything that can slow traffic down to accommodate turning vehicles from a side street. The delay from Lowell, from Hollis, from Pleasant, from Old Ayer can be pretty extensive at peak travel times. I'm sure many of us or many of you have experienced that. As was noted, challenging sight lines at many of these intersections, almost all of these intersections, but especially Hollis and Pleasant and Old Ayer. And the point was made a few minutes ago, backups caused by turning vehicles. So if you want to turn left into a driveway, one of two things happens. You get stuck behind that vehicle turning a left and your travel down Main Street is delayed, or as was noted, because there's enough curb-to-curb width along Main Street, you just cut across them to the right. And that is a very dangerous condition for the reasons that were raised, especially if it's happening near a crosswalk, because you're accelerating your vehicle to do that. You're not really in a position to suddenly slow down if you have to for a pedestrian crossing the street. And it's just sort of an unpleasant unpleasant movement to be around as well. The last point here is about single point of access for north-south travel through the community. We will have a solution concept in a little bit that speaks to that as well, but I think it's just worth emphasizing. This is the sole east, west, north-south, whatever we want to call it here, point of access through the downtown area, as well as for the region as a whole. That kind of speaks back to that location-based survey data that showed a number of trips that don't interact with Groton at all. Next slide. So solution concepts here, and again, stressing these are concepts. There's no sort of evaluation as part of this project of whether, these are feasible or some of these are feasible from an engineering standpoint or a land availability standpoint if you need to expand the right-of-way to accommodate. But moving left to right on the screen here, intersection stop control. This is really looking at Lowell specifically. It's just introducing, it would be three-way stop control with Broadmeadow being one way, but stop control along the Main Street stretch itself to allow that Lowell traffic to actually be able to flow at a better pace than it does today. Roundabouts would achieve something of a similar solution, just at a sort of higher, probably overall cost for designing it, as well as questions about its feasibility in terms of land availability, slope engineering, things like that at the Lowell Main Street location. On the bottom of the screen, geometric improvements. This one is very simple. It is about making Hollis and Pleasant and Old Ayer, instead of sort of this almost slip lane-like concept that you have if you want to get off of Main Street or veering from Main Street onto these streets. It's about trying to make these streets meet at a 90-degree angle. Obviously, this would be a pretty significant undertaking in terms of study to demonstrate its feasibility, impacts on right of way. The concept that we're showing here goes right through some green space, so we're not trying to pass any judgment on how feasible this is. This is simply just saying that trying to get those intersections to meet at a more traditional 90-degree angle would be best from a traffic flow standpoint. And then turn pockets. So this is taking the right of way along Main Street right now and actually designating a center turn lane along its length, or certain portions of Main Street that experience heavier left turn lanes, and actually with pavement markings actually indicate a left turn pocket for somebody to turn. So you are reducing those instances of people suddenly getting stuck behind traffic or needing to veer right or wanting to veer right around that traffic. Yep.
Just a couple comments on the geometric improvements. Those two commons, the one at Old Air Road and the one at Pleasant Street there, they're actually dedicated commons.
Mm-hmm.
So it requires Chapter 90 to even consider doing something like that. So it's, it was looked at, I know in the Groton Hill Music Center when they looked at the common at Prescott Common, I think it's called, at the intersection of Old Air Road and 119. And they nibbled around the edges, but they really weren't able to do anything to square it off, which is what the recommendation had been.
Mm-hmm.
So,
In the world of planning, there's no concept that we
the
rule out at the very start, but yeah, understand that we're not the first people to be thinking about that or looking at that, and I suspect that there's some policy reasons for why something like that hasn't been advanced or is not favored to be advanced. And then this slide is looking again at the evaluation criteria against this, and again, I'll look to come back to this in a couple of minutes. If you want to advance to the last category here, economic vitality. So this is looking at better wayfinding for parking in the downtown area as well as secondary access. So if you want to advance the parking consolidation, this is again back to that curb cut consolidation comment. So this is looking at Prescott as well as the hardware store, as well as that Dunkin' Groton House of Pizza concept, and just kind of noting you have back lots of all three of these, and right now they all operate distinctly from one another. And there's precedent for communities throughout New England where you do have some consolidation of off-street parking areas that go from privately owned to maybe not publicly owned, because that is a significant step, but privately managed and publicly used. So a shared parking concept might be these three owners get some in-kind services like plowing or maybe coverage of maintenance in order to accommodate a public parking supply. And this is in light both of the fact that you have these 5 curb cuts in pretty close succession to one another, and if these properties were to be combined in some way, you could potentially take 2 or 3 of those curb cuts out of the equation. But it's also being mindful of there is a absence of a perception of where one can park in downtown Groton right now if they don't have prior experience with knowing where to go in the downtown area. On the right-hand side of the screen here is looking at secondary access. So this is looking at the right-of-way of the rail trail just to the, I guess it would be the north and east of it, and looking at the potential of a new roadway between Broadmeadow and Station Avenue, and then potentially linking even further north and west towards Pleasant. This is very, very high-level concept that really is just looking at addressing the reliance on Main Street to handle all of this traffic, and looking at the idea of a redundant street that maybe can provide some more secondary access to these businesses and reduce some of those turn movements that are experienced on Main Street to get to, say, Station Avenue or some of these businesses, and our evaluation of that. So if you do want to advance to the next slide, Jeff, this is looking at the matrix of all these solutions. So from the top to bottom of this table are these 10 concepts, and given what we've heard from some feedback here, as well as noting in these slides some of these other concepts, these aren't the only 10 to look at. There's any number of other things that could be looked at as well. And on the top, the columns are looking at different evaluation criteria, from safety all the way on to coordination between private partners, which is going to score the worst because that takes effort. So we wanted to reflect that. And This isn't really meant to pass judgment on saying curb bump outs are the best idea and a roundabout at Lowell and Main is the worst idea. It is simply saying against this fairly high level evaluation criteria that we've come up with that speaks to perceptions of safety, pedestrian comfort, ability to access local businesses, bicycling comfort, wayfinding, cues from side streets, costs, whether traffic volumes would be worsened, vehicle travel time worsened, coordination. Along those 10 very high-level evaluation criteria, grading each of these solution concepts yields that curb bump out scores the best. That should be a +6 behind the thing there, and a roundabout would score the worst. But again, we really kind of want to portray this as a starting point for a larger conversation about what types of solution concepts could work along the Main Street corridor here.
Thanks. What I don't see this addressing, it seems like if you, say, live in the Four Corners area and you're trying to get to Groton Center, it could take you significantly longer with the enactment of a bunch of these things. And is that a good answer for town residents?
Yeah, I mean, you're right potentially, and I think that's for the community to kind of weigh those types of considerations against others.
And I think the bike comfort might be a negative for the curb bump out, because I've personally experienced those where you have a comfortable lane and then suddenly you have to veer out into traffic, a narrow traffic, and you have no choice but either to stop or to hit the curb or go right out into traffic. So I would have that negative there, because that definitely is an impact to bikers, the curb bump out. It's just a note.
Yeah. We have just a few more slides. So summarizing, the design of Main Street today, we feel it prohibits safe multimodal travel. It is a heavily trafficked corridor, but that wide right-of-way can enable fast vehicle travel. Access to and from the side streets can be challenging. Some of these solutions could be implemented in a pretty spot-ish way, meaning with potentially available funding or just acquisition of a little more funding, and implemented within a year or two, and can largely borrow from available resources. But a more unified corridor plan that is larger in scope than this admittedly fairly small effort that we were scoped to carry out here, that would require a larger conceptual design study, which is something that we would recommend. And this next slide kind of talks about an implementation timeframe where we would recommend a conceptual design study that looks at these solution concepts, other solution concepts that are available, some of which have been raised today, and really tries to define a community path forward for the Main Street corridor with all of these improvements in tandem with one another. I think we would discourage trying to launch into saying we can do this right now, we can do that right now, without really thinking about, if I do one thing right now, say curb bump outs, does that preclude something from happening 5, 6, 7 years down the line? Yeah. Ultimately, that might still be something that you want to do, because the need for a curb bump out to improve, pedestrian experience might be that impactful, and it's not exactly, something that you can't undo in time. But we would really recommend trying to look at these concepts in tandem with one another instead of distinctly, as we were doing. From that type of conceptual design study, there are certainly some of those short-term options that do identify those spot improvements. I think curb bump outs, some of those crosswalk enhancements that could be used or implemented using, say, Chapter 90 funding, complete streets funding that the town may have, or other small grants. A larger design process that might, say, shift the curb line itself, really reconstruct the Main Street corridor. That's going to go through a larger design process that would require some survey, alternatives analysis, particular intersection treatments that would take several years. The good news, if you could call it, is the state is relatively generous with MassWorks funding for construction for that type of project, but there would be a cost associated with at least getting it up to something like a pre-25% design. I would say at the bottom right of the screen here, some ongoing coordination over time. Some of those curb cut consolidation, parking consolidation, which is as much on property owners as it is on the public. That's something to just kind of be mindful of in the very long term, because those are opportunities that might not pop up or be present at this particular point in time, but might become present as, say, land ownership shifts or other opportunities arise to negotiate with some of these landowners. Yep.
I'd just comment that a conceptual design study limited to the Main Street corridor that you've done your study on, I think would be inadequate for the town. We need a larger, perhaps not as deep, conceptual design study for the whole traffic flow through Groton. We don't leave the Four Corners people unconsidered as, oh, they're outside the study area or other parts of town. This is the only east-west road through town. There's not any real alternatives.
John, we fully understand the needs of the rest of the town, but remember the fact that the grant that we got made us focus on the town center. Yeah, so we really understand the fact that there are other areas in town that have to be addressed and will be addressed over time. And we get that. We totally get that.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think you guys are doing a fantastic job with the charter you've got. I'm just saying, if you're going to lay out a plan for a longer term, more intensive, deep dive, let's not get that done just for the strip in the middle of town without also including the major concerns of the other parts of town.
Yeah, the bigger picture. Yep.
Do it in the context. Not to do the whole town.
A question to the consultants. In instances when some of these calming measures have been taken, does that change the traffic flow? You said, for example, 60% of the people just drive right through Groton. With these calming procedures, would there be, do you think, fewer people deciding to drive through Groton?
I have not seen that quantified anywhere, but it could hold true potentially. I mean, if you plug into, your phone, I want to get from Townsend to 495, and through Groton is 18 minutes, somewhere else is 21 minutes, and in the future it's 21 minutes each way, or 22 to get through Groton and 21. I think that's pretty significant, a 4-minute travel time difference. I don't think even traffic calming improvements would impose that type of penalty. But yeah, people would change their travel behavior if you made the travel slow and inconvenient enough to get through the downtown center. But that's that would be challenging to quantify with any instances of traffic calming in other communities like this, just because it's so contextual to the community as a whole. Yeah. Oh.
At the beginning of your presentation, I think you mentioned there was a bullet point about benchmarking. Now, was the benchmarking the examples of roundabouts and things like that, or did you do benchmarking with other communities?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to. We did not benchmark these with other communities. That was unfortunate.
I guess I'm thinking best practices. Let's put it that way. Groton has a problem that's not unique to the Northeast and particularly New England. The streets weren't laid out in a grid pattern. I've lived in Groton. Spent time living in Denver and in Chicago where they have grid pattern roads, and you always have a way around. Mm-hmm. Groton, Weston, Wayland, Lexington, you name it, all these towns have a bottleneck. And we've got it just as bad as they have it in Wayland and Sudbury and Weston and a bunch of other places around eastern Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see some benchmarking of best practices with other communities. Take a look at Rutland, Vermont, Camden, Maine, Rockland, Maine. There's so many examples in New England of this kind of structural bottleneck constriction that we're living with, mm-hmm. and we don't know how to fix it. It's a straight road, it's the only way through. And we do some de facto traffic calming now, just by default. Anytime we have a Saturday with Boy Scouts selling Christmas trees, a horse-drawn carriage out of the Ace Hardware, and a couple other things going on, traffic just grinds to a halt. I don't know how the fire department lives with that, to be honest. So those are my observations.
Yeah, and I think what you'd see in many other communities is critical thinking about what this street or what a street like that is for. Is it for carrying the traffic through, or is it for the residents, businesses, property owners alongside it? And this is a town-owned corridor. It's not a MassDOT-owned corridor. It is outside of this mile and a half long segment. MassDOT's priorities are going to be getting people from point A to point B. So they don't mind if people are going fast. Hopefully they're doing it in a safe way, but speed is less of a concern for them. For a municipally owned roadway, I found a really valuable and instructive way of thinking about this is from an urban thinker called Chuck Maroon. He runs an organization called Strong Towns, and he put this in a recent article as, you have a roadway that can be designed to facilitate access, it can be designed to facilitate speed, it can be designed to facilitate safety, but it can't do all three. It can do at most two. And I would say that Main Street today, it's definitely designed to facilitate access. There's a bustling, commercial sector along it, and there's any number of ways to get into driveways and access these projects. And it's trying to split the difference between speed and safety. It is understanding that there are a lot of pedestrians about, especially with the schools, and seeking ways to make that environment safe, but the roadway itself is still somewhat designed for carrying vehicles at a faster rate of speed. And that's going to continue to be a conflict point, and something that hopefully, the community can have a discussion about what it wants to prioritize out of that. Mm-hmm.
Just one last point. During the rush hour, if I'm heading westbound, my Waze or Google Maps will tell me to avoid the town because it has a 1 mile backup. And if we make it slower, it's going to be 2 mile backup. And what it tells me to do is go down Gay Road over to 40 and then come back around, or Martins Pond Road, or if I'm down on Route 2, it tells me to stay on Route 2 to Air and then come up Farmers Row versus hitting. And so if there's enough backup, people will start going different ways.
Yeah.
And you will also be having 2 mile backups. It'll go all the way to Four Corners. And you'll be literally in a traffic jam for 20 minutes.
Well, along that line, one of your earlier slides showed the number of people who exceed the speed limit. What about if you had more police enforcement? Would people then decide to go to Route 2A, which is better accommodated to handle that kind of traffic, in my opinion, versus coming through town? I don't know if there's been any look at that, but that might be a simple solution that's not very costly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how many people are going to be making different travel decisions because they can't speed illegally through an area. That would be somewhat immoral, but mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we're good to pass it off to Tim. Yeah.
Hi. Thanks, Mike. Good job. Do you think everyone agrees here that something needs to be done? Yeah. Okay. And we're not suggesting that all of Main Street be changed. We are suggesting that we prioritize safety and pedestrian safety and walkability in the center of town. That's what we are prioritizing. Stantec has come forward with a number of possible suggestions, and it's up to us as a town and as with all of your input to determine what is the best way to achieve safety. One example is in front of Joni's house at the end of Route 40. Classic example where people are going around the car trying to turn left to go up to Route 40, and she's almost been killed like 5 times.
House has been hit, my sign has been hit, my tree has been hit, I've almost been hit. It is that passing on the right and flying around on the right has caused, I've got photographs of horrific, for a 30-mile-an-hour zone, that intersection is a time bomb.
So it's our intention to engage with the public to determine your input and to determine the right path to suggest to the townspeople of what to do. And we're going to be having further meetings and committees to help us and help you determine this. So thank you to Stantec for coming up with this great information and suggestions and analytics. It's all terrifically valuable. And we just hope that you guys see what we're trying to do, and safety is the top priority. Because there are a lot of occasions on Main Street that are quite dangerous. Quite dangerous. And so something has to be done. Yeah.
But don't make it take 10, 15 minutes longer for every school kid to get to their class.
Well, in my own opinion, if that's going to save someone's life or leg, I'm good with that. You know? Well, we all have opinions, and we're all going to share our opinions, no question. But for me, I don't care how long it takes to get to the town center. You know? I live in town center.
There you go, you don't have to go through it.
I do. You know me. I'm in real estate. I'm all over the place, right? So, you know, I'd rather have a calm town center, and if I have to go around in side streets to get to where I'm going to go, that's what I'm going to do.
Town center people always
You know?
say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I prefer safety. Yes.
I feel that the contribution of having the streets narrow slightly with the bike lane created and possibly some reduction in speed just for those crossings, like a small hump or something.
Yeah.
That would offer increased bike activity, increased walking activity, more safe passage. People just have to understand you're downtown, you're not on 405.
Yeah, I personally agree, but it's not just up to me, right? It's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to come to a majority vote. It's going to come to a town meeting at some point, but
This is just the beginning of a process to hear, you know, we started out, we won this award in October. By the time we went through the bidding process, we really began only in January. And we've taken the last several months to get to the point where professional ideas come forward. As I said in the beginning, we're not picking winners and losers. We're presenting them all to you to get your thoughts, reflections, input, and tonight's been very healthy in that regard. Everybody has an opinion. We want to hear it. We're not picking winners and losers. I do agree with Jeff in terms of public safety is really number one. We, as Grotonians, in a sense, don't own our own Main Street. But we have the opportunity to do something because we literally do. It's not a state highway from Old Air Road to Elm Street. So how do we envision what that means? And that's the process. So it's just beginning. No arguments. Everybody has an opinion. It's going to get recorded in this. We're trying to get to feedback, input, and engagement, and embracing something that will get us prepared for the next 10 years. But let me now shift, and again, thank you, Michael. It was a great presentation. It's been great working with you, and I wish we had more to have you engaged. We'll see what the future brings. But let me turn to introduce someone that to many people in this room is not a stranger. Tim Hess is the chief architect of Studio Institute. Thank you. And he's been here for a number of years. I'm going to introduce him as an old friend to the town, and his concepts, again, are out there for us to think about, to think through the process. Nothing's going to happen overnight. It's going to depend on town support and the marketplace. But this process is really genuine and important. Let me turn to Tim.
Is that on? Great. Howdy. I'm going to have to ask you to bear with me in two specific ways tonight. One, my presentation is in the form of a video, and our audio is not perfect and seamless, so it's not going to be fantastic audio. The second thing, the last time I made this presentation, it took me almost an hour, so that's why it's recorded. It's 27 minutes. If you can bear with me and plow through it, we'll get to any and every question there is after, but I think it'd be difficult to stop midway and try to handle things and continue. So happy to be here. Nice to see you all. And hi, I'm Tim Hess, architect and principal at Studio in Situ Architects. We're a 7-person design studio focused on contextual placemaking in a holistic, sustainable way. Our work includes municipal scale planning and site design, cultural, commercial, and mixed-use developments, and single-family homes, additions, and renovations. We work in demanding sites and contexts around Massachusetts and New England, and we're committed to the sensitive intervention and reconciliation necessary when integrating new built fabric into important places of deep integrity, like historic districts and conservation areas. I lived in Groton from 2004 till 2012, and I served over that span first on the Station Avenue Committee, then the Planning Board, and then as acting chair of the Design Review Committee for the Town Center Overlay District. The In Situ team includes the architectural designers and urbanists Joshua LaLiberte and Matthew Killam. Matthew is a Groton resident and a member of the Planning Board. By way of a municipal RFP process and a grant awarded to the Destination-Groton Committee by the Community One Stop for Growth program, we've been working with Destination-Groton for the last few months. Many municipal groups like planning boards, historic district commissions, and conservation commissions have acute responsibilities for certain aspects of the business and vitality of their towns on a month-to-month and a project-by-project basis. These familiar land use bodies are responsible for reviewing applications to execute built work within the areas of their jurisdiction. That responsibility leaves them little bandwidth for proactive study and conceptual work. In this regard, the Destination-Groton Committee is enjoying a unique latitude. Free of the review and approval business, they've worked to cultivate synergies among certain aspirations identified in the municipal master plan, the spirit and vision described for the Town Center Overlay District, and opportunities expressed by a pair of recent economic studies commissioned by the town. To help communicate beyond the relatively small circle of people who've been able to attend Destination-Groton's frequent public meetings, I'm presenting this September 12th draft report on Studio in Situ's piece of that work in progress. A recent economic leakage and recapture study identified a sum of $61 million spent annually by Groton residents on retail purchases outside of town. The same study suggested about a third of that sum could be contained. That is, Groton residents are leaving town to spend almost $20 million every year for things they might prefer to purchase in Groton. A separate study of Groton's gathering strength as a destination also identifies promising economic opportunity. Visitor metrics at places like Gibbet Hill, the Groton Inn, and Groton Hill Music Center suggest regional tourism may blossom here to become a powerful economic driver. Even when regarded with the uncertainty and even skepticism appropriate for any projection of the future, these two studies describe an economic opportunity of a significant magnitude. Both the leakage, recapture, and the destination economic studies apply to the town as a whole. Four Corners, the CVS Plaza, the Town Center, Mill Run Plaza and West Groton each present opportunities for retail. The historic fabric of the town center, however, makes it especially well suited to host much of the destination-oriented opportunity and a related range of the recapture opportunity. The aspiration in Groton for a vibrant, walkable town center is not new. It's now 18 years ago, in 2007, that the Station Avenue Overlay District was approved at town meeting. The town was recognized by the Commonwealth for the effort with a Smart Growth, Smart Energy Award. Published in 2008, the Design Guidelines vision mourned the loss of Main Street's role in gathering the community, now subordinated to its burden carrying the tide of some 20,000 cars twice a day right through town. Stantec's 2025 mobility study has clarified with other metrics the degree to which routes 119 and 225 have displaced Main Street. Between Old Ayer Road and Pleasant Street, only about 40% of the traffic on Main Street is local, though in fact these state highways both end as they give way to Main Street in the center and reemerge at the opposite side. This graphic is pulled from a 2008 traffic calming report produced by a town committee in connection with the adoption of the overlay district. Then as now, reducing the danger that heavy and fast car and truck traffic poses to pedestrians was a high priority. From that same report, this set of options for traffic calming suggests a range of possible remedies similar to those in Stantec's 2025 work. Wide travel lanes encourage speeding and threaten walkability. By the advice in this 08 slide, travel lanes would be reduced to 9 feet, and from within the same existing curb-to-curb dimensions, which on Main Street is around 50 feet through the town center. Space is made for people, on foot, on bicycles or wheelchairs, and for green space. All these years later, existing conditions on Main Street have probably deteriorated more than they've improved, and the a la carte catalog of solutions remains largely untapped, and it's expanded now with the new mobility study. By 2014, the district was expanded and renamed the Town Center Overlay District. The 2014 vision statement clarifies that in order to manifest its aspirations and to achieve a compelling sense of place in a durable way, the district has got to be cohesive and visually legible. It's got to be contiguous and unbroken. Revised for the 2014 updates, this vision diagram specifically promotes the development of infill buildings to create continuous and cohesive street walls and streetscapes. Parking is shown behind street front building mass. Shared parking is supported by vehicular circulation directly from parcel to parcel. The diagram's small scale, however, communicates these principles at arm's length. Designed to look and feel similar to Groton Center, this hypothetical town's composition also communicates clear intentions about parking in relation to building mass. But Groton's parcel shapes and other real constraints aren't represented. The work to apply these ideas in real space has been left for another time. In this 2025 vision planning, we've approached the process a little bit like a test fit for the 08 and 2014 visions, to unsilo some of the key concepts and principles those initiatives promote and try to understand some of their interdependencies and ways they might influence each other in context. Efforts to apply the advice or manifest the spirit of these programs have to be reconciled with certain existing conditions, the geometries of topography, circulation, and parcels, the zoning's fundamental value proposition, and then culture and identity and attitudes about change. To a large degree, hills and wetlands create the pinch point where so much car and truck traffic is squeezed through the town center on Main Street. And 2 of Groton's 3 historic districts straddle Main Street along the length of the town center. This map shows the piecemeal patchwork of underlying zoning. Shown here in a red hatch pattern, the town center district includes parcels disconnected from each other and from the original contiguous Station Avenue district. To help consider the overlay district's value proposition, we test-fitted several parcels for their carrying capacities. Housing density is capped at 14 units per acre. For each dwelling, 1.5 parking spaces must be provided on the parcel. For retail, we didn't find a cap on area, but 3 parking spaces must be provided for every 1,000 square feet. Any parcel with a restaurant needs 1 parking space for every 3 seats, and then 5 more spaces. With 5,775 square feet, this lot at 167 Main Street could carry up to 8 dwellings. Here's a 3D view of that parcel. The overlay zoning promotes the development of housing in a story or 2 over ground floor retail or restaurant uses. Filling the whole ground floor of a building here, this diagram shows about 7,000 square feet of retail. Current zoning requires 23 spaces, and that's satisfied here, but now there's no room for anything else. This is a 1-story building, no residential or professional office space upstairs. There's more parking here than building footprint. This diagram considers 2 stories of residential over the same 7,000 square feet of retail. The ongoing housing crisis is well known, and in many contexts, if not most, residential development is a less risky business than retail. The 16 residential units we show here is double the density allowed, and it would require 24 parking spaces. The lot's 23 spaces are already committed to the retail requirement, so we're short all the 24. We could fit another 8 spaces if the parking setback were waived. Allowing more housing may widen the district's appeal for development, and it would help support the commercial components. But parking requirements would have to be relaxed significantly. Allowing reductions via waivers within site plan review or design review is common in some towns, but a direct or by rights reduction might more effectively communicate and deliver value. To fit just 3 apartments above the retail parking could be relaxed to 2.5 per 1,000 square feet, or 18 spaces. This allows the 1.5 spaces per residential unit, or 5, to reach the same parking capacity of 23 spaces. This model shows 8 residential units above the same retail footprint. Relaxing retail parking to 2.5 per 1,000 square feet and residential to 1 per dwelling, then we'd be short 4 spaces. In this scenario, the neighboring bank's parcel can fit 12 more spaces than they need, so shared parking and circulation could provide enough relief to serve these 8 dwellings and another 8. The same kind of test fit applied across the core portion of the town center shows a broader impact of parking relief. Consider this build-out scenario under 3 alternate parking regimes. Same set of buildings in each case, about 26,000 square feet of retail overall, 8,900 square feet of dining, and 67 new dwellings. Under the current overlay zoning, 382 parking spaces are required. To reach that 382, this model counts all the on-street parking within the red boundary and relies notably on 2 large municipal lots, 77 spaces at the 1 o'clock position here and another 60 spaces behind the Prescott School. In 2022, the town of Concord was advised by the Engineering Corporation to trim their parking requirement so that 1-bedroom dwellings would require just 1 parking space, and only dwellings of 2 or more bedrooms would require 1.5 spaces. In Stockbridge today, just 2 spaces are required for every 1,000 square feet of retail, and 1 space is required for every 3 suites of a restaurant. Adopting these standards together here would cut the requirement by 118 spaces, down to 264. In this model, we reach 264 with the 2 biggest municipal lots shrunk down very dramatically. In East Hampton's Smart Growth Zoning District, adopted in 2022, retail requires 1 parking space per 1,000, dining 4 per establishment plus 1 for every 4 seats, and each dwelling requires just 1 space. Adopting this standard here would remove 181 parking spaces from this piece of Groton Town Center. This model shows the 201 spaces which would be required. Another way geometry impacts values in a building's height. Groton's zoning bylaw defines height to include the full dimension of a pitched roof. By this definition, Town Hall's height is about 47 feet. And the building at 113 Main Street is about 39 feet tall. If these 2 examples are well suited to the scale and fabric of the historic district, redefining height might be appropriate. Maybe softer and trickier than topography and economics, cultural issues could be another obstacle to growth and vitality in the town center. the consensus and support or the understanding may not be strong or intact among various groups in town. There may be too little real buy-in. In Maynard, Mass., we've seen an interesting and powerful dynamic play out in two ways that town worked to make changes. Around 2007, the town adopted a downtown overlay district bylaw. The context is different from Groton's in important ways, of course, but the goals to enhance walkability and retail, to enrich the spatial qualities of the public realm, and improve cultural offerings downtown, to increase housing, to strengthen connections to the town's essential place assets, and to increase revenues to the town, not so different from those of Groton's overlay district. And the mechanisms of the overlay that, in exchange for, and maybe even in proportion to, the project's support of the district's goals, the town will increase a parcel's development value, that's essentially the same too. This 24-unit single-use apartment building was the first new project approved under the new overlay zoning. No retail, no public amenities or contribution to the public realm in any way. Zoning requirements, design guidelines, rules and regulations, which were all in place, were not effectively applied. Just a few years later, the same 24-unit formula was approved in another corner of the overlay. Again, no retail and no public amenity. Events take place. In 2017, a long volunteer and municipal effort created an official cultural district through a program of the Mass Cultural Council. While the Overlay District Initiative had already articulated the same desires to cultivate a thriving and cohesive and walkable place for community, commerce, and culture, and codified them in zoning, the Cultural District Initiative was somehow more alive and more engaging. This later round of civic conversation was rooted first in ideas about events and identity, in the desire to expand the range and improve the quality of cultural activities and offerings, and then about our places and how the built environment here might change to become more hospitable to those events. Could changes to the place effectively prompt cultural activity? How can a district best embody and manifest the spirit and identity of a town? This is the work of a cultural district initiative. In the fall of 2025, the project illustrated above will be complete. This same developer's 24 residential unit formula, this time with retail on the ground floor and a broad public access riverfront promenade connecting Main Street to the Assabet River Rail Trail. The project was reviewed and approved by the Planning Board and Conservation Commission, of course, and not by the Cultural Council. But through its embrace of the cultural district, the whole community's understanding of the overlay district had changed. Thinking about events was more effective in expressing the value of place. After working through all those kind of component or individual factor studies, we've tried to represent a kind of synthesis of all these aspirations and challenges in a scale model, which begins to clarify some needs for compromise and some opportunities for synergies. Engineering of traffic roundabouts is beyond the scope of the current studies, but we can see in the configuration modeled here two volatile intersections where a pair appears to fit. Introducing one at Main and Hollis and another at Main and Lowell Road could serve like a set of thresholds to distinguish the town center from the state highways. Main Street's travel lanes are shown here narrowed to 10 feet. Bike lanes are added between Lowell and Hollis. An elevated speed table is shown at Station and Main Streets. All Main Street crosswalks are raised to sidewalk height. The quantity of curb cuts is reduced along Main Street, and circulation and parking is shared across parcels. The historic access from Boutwell House to the rail trail is reestablished, and a new civic space marks Station Avenue's meeting of the rail trail with a new common, a pavilion, and an observation tower. Vistas across the Broadmeadow, through the center's historic district, and up to Gibbet Hill are threaded together in a town center loop trail and embody a broad sweep of the character and spirit of Groton in a single walking circuit of just 10 to 15 minutes duration. The key questions, of course, are to what extent do Groton Center's existing actual conditions lend themselves to changes of these sorts and on this scale? Would it still look and feel like Groton? Would this kind of smart growth work to recapture some of Groton's retail leakage? Might some guests in town for a wedding, a concert, or a parent's weekend feel inclined to extend their visits by a few hours or a few days? Would the district's 100 or so new residents contribute real vitality to the culture, the commerce, and the community spirit in the town center or for the town as a whole? To achieve the cohesion and continuity of the street wall and the streetscape, and to support both development of and operation of significant retail, this model represents about twice the quantity of housing allowed by overlay zoning. The parking shown here represents the kind of modest reduction from current requirements that might be available by way of waivers within the review process. In this sequence of low aerial views, characteristics of massing, scale, and composition of both the built fabric and the landscape of Groton's historic town center are preserved and enhanced. First Parish Church is in the right foreground, with the inn just beyond. In the middle distance, a bit to the left, we can see a couple of large additions at the Duncan Plaza and at Moissan's. Across Main Street, we see the town center loop trail returning toward the inn. In the background at left, new density along Station Avenue peeks out from behind the trees. Here we're looking in that same direction from the Common at First Parish. New commercial and mixed-use additions could fill some gaps along Main Street. We can also see here the reduction in curb cuts, some cross-parcel circulation, and some shared parking. In this view from the inn's front porch, new building mass at the Duncan Plaza and Moissan's is composed and articulated to improve these places' participation in the historic district. Narrowed curb cuts improve the continuity and safety of sidewalks and encourage strolling. Narrowing the travel lanes to 10 feet and striping the on-street parking allows the introduction of bike lanes in both directions, all within Main Street's existing width from curb to curb. Past the Prescott here, where Salt and Light and its neighbor are so close to each other, similar density is shown continuing to Station Avenue. At Station and Main, the whole intersection is elevated to curb height. Bulb outs and green space help to amplify the cross-axis between Boutwell House and the rail trail. In this kind of environment, pedestrian and vehicular users read the physical cues and feel the composition and the fabric of the space. This view shows a new building at the former Tory block, which could be positioned and articulated to compose the streetscape and shape the volume between the buildings. If a connection could be made from Adams to Court and Station and the rail trail, the resulting street frontage might enhance the potential for some development. Simple, handsome, light industrial barn buildings, like those shown here in yellow, might work well for uses like artisanal manufacturing, a microbrewery, restaurants. Where Station Avenue meets the rail trail, a grand-scaled civic amenity could become an inviting destination and reestablish the historic access from the Boutwell House. Set on a new common here, a pavilion could animate the rail trail with a compelling way station, a gateway to the town center, and a trailhead for the town center loop trail. It could host farmers markets, outdoor movies, and live performances. It could include a visitor center and public restrooms. Aligned with Boutwell House, this new amenity could address Station Avenue and the town center with an emphatic and gracious civic dignity. The space behind Prescott can currently seem isolated, related only to Prescott and not to other surroundings. Its position and municipal ownership present opportunities for the center, but wetlands to the north and the west are obstacles to connection in those directions. The model imagines wetlands crossing boardwalks to stitch this area together with the rail trail, here as a length of the town center loop trail. A new access to Broadmeadow Road is also represented. In this view, northwest along the rail trail, the pavilion introduces the town center at Station Avenue. In this view up Station Avenue toward Boutwell House, 4 new buildings are shown in white. In this view from within the pavilion, the common occupies the middle ground and Station Avenue extends straight ahead. In this overview from Main Street toward the Broadmeadow, a pair of mixed-use buildings helps to establish the corner and support the access toward the common. A raised intersection or speed table would fit about like this. With a well-composed streetscape, a destination amenity positioned at a focal point, and local traffic only, Station Avenue could reestablish much of the dynamic and walkable community, commerce, and culture Main Street has lost to routes 119 and 225. The town center's position in the wider landscape squeezed between Gibbet Hill and the Broadmeadow, represents the major challenge for vehicular circulation. But that same condition might be an opportunity for pedestrians. If we think of a vista as an important cultural and civic asset, then the town center has a unique and powerful placemaking opportunity to enhance visibility and access to these natural and agrarian landscapes in direct relationship to the historic built fabric here. A town center loop trail could gather and present a sort of introductory hint of the town's broader cultural identity, all within a 10 to 15 minute stroll. I'll just let this little animation run, the pedestrian's view. And this one moving northwest over Main Street. And we'll end on this overview loop over the town center. Thanks.
I just have a question. Why are all of the parking calculations about ground level parking spaces? I mean, do we not have opportunities for parking beneath buildings or on top of buildings?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think the honest answer is that we've sort of dismissed those as they just tend to be very, very expensive. You know, there are occasions where in say an apartment building of a substantial size, you can in a reasonable way. I mean, there may be some chances here. I think that my knee-jerk instinct is that most of these buildings probably wouldn't be big enough to do that. accommodate, in order for that to be reasonably efficient, you need to be at a very minimum 60 feet wide, if not 70 feet wide. So, yeah, good question.
Yeah, so I've been quiet this whole time because I wanted to let everybody finish what they're talking about before I can react to it. So I have a whole number of things that I've been making notes along, so this is, bear with me here. This is going to be kind of in the order that you guys presented it. So starting with the economic development ideas, you jump right in and make the assumption that we want that. And first of all, you haven't shown that economic development is good. I'm not saying it's not, but I think the burden of proof is on you if you're going to propose changes in that area. Some of the things that come on the back of my mind is what's the cost of all that additional revenue? Do we really care that much about the additional revenue? When you know, it's going to, the more stuff you have, the more you're going to need more police and more fire and all these things. And I haven't seen anything that shows what the overall net benefit really is. I think of it as, let me look at my notes here, more economically. Yeah, I look at other more economically developed communities in our immediate area, and they all seem to be having budget problems too. So at that level, it doesn't look to me like that's a solution. I mean, look at Littleton, look at Westford. They're not any better off than we are. Then they have a lot more economic development. So you need to show me that that's a good thing before I'm behind it. To me, keeping the character of town is the #1 priority. So anything you do, I would like to see no new trees cut down. So do it all on an existing, you want to tear down a building, put something else up? Okay. Want to tear down some trees? No. That's, at least that's my view of things. Fortunately, most of the town center is already built, but there's a lot more trees there than you think, and there's a lot more wetlands than Tim seems to think, but we'll get to that later. Okay, the roadway ideas. You know, everybody likes to say this, safety is #1. Well, nothing is absolute. There is always going to be risk with everything you do, and you can make things more safe and make trade-offs with something else, but you can never make it absolutely safe. So saying safety is #1 is a completely meaningless concept, because if that's the only thing, you would block off all the traffic, because letting any car go through might hurt somebody. So, you know, let's not do these meaningless statements like safety is the only important possibility. Safety is one of the trade-offs we have to juggle, granted. But nothing is ever 100% safe. So the other big thing that hit me when I saw this roadway presentation is everything seems to be, except from the driver's point of view. We have a problem that 119 backs up every day, especially going westbound. And you said yourself, we have like something like 20,000 cars going through every day. Each way, right. Why are we not trying to figure out how to get those cars through there quicker? Because the faster you get them through, the less dense they will be, right? That's just plain old physics. You had a comment here about traffic calming, and you even said it's going to make things slow and inconvenient enough. Those are exactly your words. That is a solution. That to me is a problem. Right now we have a problem. It's already too slow and inconvenient, and we need to get things, if you get things through quicker, they will be there less longer. Now we have to also figure out how to juggle that together with safety. But the answer is not just barring it all off and making everybody crawl through 10 miles an hour. Let me look at, sorry, looking at everything. Yeah, wide Main Street to me, I've always thought that was really nice. I like the fact you go through Groton and there's a really wide Main Street. I think, to me, it gives me a nice feel for the place. What I also like is when I'm turning left into Station Ave by Town Hall, I deliberately go as far as I can to the middle of the road and let other people go by so that I'm not blocking something. And if you narrow these things, everybody taking a left turn is going to be blocking things, and it's going to make it even slower. So those same 20,000 cars are going to take a lot longer to get through, which is going to mean it just seems like it makes the problem worse. people still need to get through Groton because there aren't reasonable alternative methods. If you're living in Townsend, you really got no other way to do this. So those cars are still going to be there. I would say you should figure out how to get them out of here as quickly as you can rather than make it so inconvenient that it adds another 10 minutes to their commute, and I don't know what they do. They probably have to live with it, which is really not a good answer. I have to live with it. I don't live in the town center, so when I go to the center of Groton, I'm either heading someplace through it or I'm getting to like the middle of town like Town Hall. Either way, I want to get there without being calmed or whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's turning left. Yeah, okay, good place to look at this is Main Street and Air. It's a mess. They have done these things, and there is no alternative way around. You can kind of get around behind some of those buildings, but it's effectively not really possible. So you've got a bottleneck there, and they've slowed everything down. There's crosswalks every 50 feet, and the traffic is crawling 10 to 15 miles an hour. Every time I go there, as soon as I get there, got to stop, and it takes several minutes to get that, tenth of a mile, 2/10 of a mile through the center of Air. I really don't want to see Groton that way. It's already too much that way. Yeah, I looked at your chart, and you had the plus and minuses. Under the vehicle traffic time, every single option was either 0 or negative. You haven't done anything to try to make it better. Okay, now talking about wait a minute, did I miss something here? Crosswalk. Sorry, I took a lot of notes while you guys were talking, so give me a second here. Yeah, I realized turning left onto Route 40, I know Joni hates that because she lives right there. But on the other hand, I don't want to wait for somebody, if I'm going eastbound on 119, I don't want to get stuck behind somebody who has to wait to turn on Route 40 because they do have to wait a long time. I want to go around, so instead of not allowing that, why don't you find a way to make it safer and easier? Maybe put the pedestrian walk someplace else, away from that. So to keep the pedestrians away, let the cars go around quicker. Anyway, so to Tim's town center vision, one of your first arguments was a parking requirement reduction. It sounds good, but you haven't addressed why the parking requirements are what they are now and what the effect of reducing them would be. Would there be not enough parking spaces? You know, if the answer is no, then that's a great idea. But you didn't address why they are what they are now and reducing them. What is the cost of reducing them? Will people still have a place to park? What you're suggesting allows higher density. Is that a good thing? Do we want that? Higher density of more people requires more school infrastructure, more police infrastructure, more fire infrastructure. You haven't made the case, at least to me, that that's a good thing. I do think it's a very interesting overall vision. What I noticed in a lot of your drawings was it seemed to ignore some areas that are private property. Maybe you were just assuming, well, in the long run, maybe we can purchase that or make deals with them. I don't know. You didn't say any of that, but I noticed some of your buildings were in places where there's other private buildings right now, so I'm not sure how you expected that to work. And there's a lot more wetlands than you were thinking. Like that tower, you had it out into Broadmeadow. That ain't going to happen. That's just a no-no in Massachusetts, building something like that in a wetland. Just anyway. Again, we need to address how people can get through town. And I don't know, this is where I'm not a planner, but it seems like if we can, it was a very interesting idea allowing a corridor along where now is near where the rail trail is at the ends of Station Ave and what's the other name of that street there, whatever? Yeah, that's right, Adams. If that can be somehow local and then let the people that need to get through town use Main Street. I don't know the answer. I'm not a professional in that area. But my last comment is overall, I'd like to see no loss of trees or unbuilt area in whatever it is you do. And I'll shut up now.
Along the line of what Olin was talking about. One of the concerns I have about the Destination-Groton project is I'm not clear what the ultimate goal is. Certainly some of the stuff, correcting some of the problems in the Main Street is certainly worthwhile. But, I read something like even what you guys put out, regional access. Groton sits at the midpoint of the Nashua River Rail Trail, offering the chance to draw thousands of weekend cyclists to the town center. Thousands? Do we really want that? And what would, what would, if it's economic, I mean, how much is a biker going to spend? They might stop and get gas. Maybe they go to the, convenience store and buy a soda or something.
I can address that when you're ready.
But, I mean, I just, I remember I went to some vacation spot. I can't remember where it was. It was a nice town. And at one point they'd made a decision, and they attributed it to some selectman at the time who said, I'd rather have one person spend $100 than 100 people come and spend $1. And I'm not sure whether, Groton is a small town still. It's on the borderline, but it's still a small town. And I just worry that lots of people coming in is really not going to help anything, and I'm not sure what the advantage of it is. Though I do think a lot of the work you're doing is very good, and I don't want to be discouraging to it, but I'm just concerned that we might lose a small town.
Thank you.
Our number one priority is not to lose the small town. Our number one priority is not to change the experience of what Groton is. And the reason why Destination-Groton was formed was because of the inevitable and increasing daily the amount of people that discover Groton because of the Groton Hill Music Center and other various amenities and attractions that we have. It's happening. So the reason why we wanted to form was to get ahead of the potential harm that may do. While we're at it, we wanted to get ahead of the potential revenue opportunity that the town could harness. Why? Because we need it. We need more revenue. I don't want to see any more people have to leave their house or even think about having to leave their house because of the high real estate taxes. So that's my main driver. That's my main driver. Well, it's going to do something. I mean, there is a balance between revenue and change. And of course, the change takes a higher priority. We don't want it to change the experience. But we know, and I'm sure you guys have all experienced this, a higher volume of people since Groton Hill Music came. It's going to increase. And with that, property values are going to go up. And with that, real estate taxes are going to go up. And with that, people are going to struggle more. My own personal mission is to try and lessen that struggle. The fact is that conservatively, $20 to $5 million in spending can be brought back into town. Now, that's not to say that that $25 million is all going to go back into the coffers like meals taxes and other such things. But eventually, more people are going to be here. And they may be here in ways that we don't like. So we're trying to get ahead of that vision and create a path or a vision that is more compatible to us and compatible to the tourists,
That is correct. Why aren't the property taxes in Westford and Littleton's a lot lower than here because they've got all this stuff we're talking about?
because they have a very large industrial base. We don't. We have nothing.
They have the same issues we do, their property taxes aren't low.
And they are trying to solve the same issues.
But going down their path doesn't seem to have worked.
We're going down our own path, Owen. We're trying to figure out what's right for the town, what's right for the residents, what's going to change the town in the least possible way, change the experience of the town in the least possible way, trying to get ahead of it. So these vision planning, I mean, yeah, you saw, first of all, the Station Avenue, you saw a lot of stuff on Station Avenue, right? That represented roughly 37,000 square feet of potential space. It's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. But at least it's a prompt where people can start to think about how can we do something to improve traffic, walkability, safety, and additional revenue in a manageable way that's acceptable to everybody.
Seems like it makes sense. You talk about people are coming, we have to deal with it. I get that. I'm sorry. You need to stick to one argument. At one point you said, people are coming, we need to be prepared for that. Okay, I can understand that. Then you start saying, well, we need this to reduce our property taxes. I have not seen that demonstrated at all. And that should be a separate argument and separate discussion.
Yeah, I understand that we understand that we have to do an analysis as to exactly how much could contribute to the bottom line. You know, and we have some of that data. It's evolving, but we know we have to prove the value proposition in doing it. So everything balanced, that's where we're at.
This is a good conversation to have. These are obvious questions. Richard, to your point about thousands of bikers, on our website, I encourage all of you, tonight you got 5 or 6 handouts. There are 18 separate items listed on the vision plan on the website. One of them, I believe, cites a 2019 Memorial Day weekend on the rail trail. And Paul, you can certainly back me up if I'm on or off target. That 4-day weekend generated 3,995 bikers passing through. What we're imagining is if Station Avenue were more inviting for retail, that would add to, oh, let's stop here and meet my friend or something and have a cup of coffee or an ice cream or whatever. So that's really referencing that as a data point. We're not trying to expand that to 50,000 or some other number. It's the rail trail use that goes through there on that one holiday weekend was nearly 4,000 bikers, walkers and bikers, not just bikers. So that clicks a thought around, well, if we had something inviting for them to stop and have that cup of coffee, would that add to the town coffers? On a personal note, you know, I have grandkids now in the school system. We all love the school system. I moved here because of the beauty of the town and the school system. And we just went through Prop 2.5 crises the last 2 or 3 years. We're looking to contribute to increasing the revenue stream that would add to the coffers of the town. It's not going to solve all the problems. There's one of those 18 items on the website, I encourage you to go there, is an economic analysis. We hired the services of a professor a well-known economic professor out of the University of, which state was it? What's that? No, that was a different one. But anyway, I forget which university now. I think it's Minnesota. But so there's an economic analysis in there, and she breaks out if you grow to X amount of square feet, what's the bottom line to the town? So some of those answers are at least there for review and either criticism or at least a better understanding. So what we're, as Jeff was suggesting, we're looking at what's happened to the town, what's going to happen to continue to evolve over 10 years, and how do we get out front. Just as 5 years ago we said, gee, in 2 years Groton Hill Music is coming to town. How do we get in front of that and understand it? We've done that. We're attempting to do that here. So what you've seen from our two consultants is taking the concepts of growth, manage that growth so that we don't become something we don't want, but take advantage of the facts. On the economic side, there's an opportunity to increase revenue streams to the town. On the public safety side, we own Main Street. We don't act like we own it. And we have the buses and the trucks and the speeders. And sidebar story, my 12-year-old granddaughter now, last year she wanted to go with her friends from school and walk downtown. We said, no, it's too dangerous. This year, we had to give in. And I pray every day. I've pushed the button to cross the street to go to Jeff's office, and 18-wheelers are still going by. So I don't mean to make this an either or. It's how do we think collectively as a community about public safety, the fact that we could do something to make Main Street ours, not a thoroughfare. I greatly appreciate the concerns. If you live in Four Corners, it's going to add to the time to get to the town hall or wherever you're going. We need to think this through so that we can solve a problem together. It may not be this or that, but I don't wish to throw, the baby out with the bathwater on this. It's a challenge. It's difficult. We need to think through the possibilities to improve what's happening and which is going to continue to happen. That's our motivation. So comments tonight and opinions tonight are hugely important. We want to capture them. We want to think them through. We want to engage with you. We're going to have 3 more public open meetings. I hope to see every one of you there. I hope the crowd will grow to 200 people. We don't have all the answers. We're searching for a solution that improves the community that we all love and share.
And if I could just add one thing to that, and then I'll pass it around to more. I grew up in Westford. When I grew up, 495 had just been built. It was a ghost road. And I remember my dad saying to me, the sprawl is moving out from Boston. It's coming out this way. It's not going to stop. Now 495 is the way 128 used to be. It is what it is. We're going to have traffic. And what we're trying to do is to find a way to make it more affordable for the people to live here, to make it so that we don't cut any more trees down and we have these beautiful vistas. That's a big one for me as well. I want it to keep the historic, beautiful nature. That's why I moved to the center of town. But we also have to understand that if it's going to take a little bit longer to get through town, that's the nature of where we live. The sprawl is here. And so how do we manage all of this that we've been talking about tonight and protect our town, but to manage it, and sometimes we're just going to have to deal with the traffic. I have to deal with it every day. It is what it is. But how do we make it safer and better, and how do we make it so that we can have people like me be able to stay here? I hope to be able to stay here until I die. But if the prices keep going up, I might not be able to. So we're trying to find ways to protect it, preserve it, and make it a good place to live, but accepting the fact that the sprawl is here. So that's just.
Are the presentations going to be available on your website?
Thank you. Jim Gemeiner, Groton Sewer Commission. I know that you talk an awful lot about economic development here, and one thing that you do need to consider that if you're, retail space, not a problem. You start talking about additional dwelling space in the center of town, you're talking about restaurants in particular, which is where you get your food tax from. We're going to start running into constraints, not necessarily capacity constraints, but our ability to pump up the pepperel, which I don't think should be solved just on the ratepayers' shoulders. It's going to need some town involvement. So that's just something else that you need to consider, that you need to look at all the associated costs. And we're talking significant between 5-7 million to upgrade pump station and pipes.
Maybe I missed this at the beginning, but if you could just clarify where the funding comes from, because as you mentioned, we can't even pay for our schools. So as much as I would love to have a safer Main Street for my children to walk downtown every day so that they don't have to literally run across the street and try not to get hit by a car, like happened today. As much as I would love to see that happen, I would rather have teachers. And so I just would, and maybe I missed it and maybe you described that, but having, seen all of these presentations in the town that we came from did a huge renovation of their downtown. They added a rotary, they added the bike lanes, they did the bump outs, and it looks gorgeous. It's wonderful to walk down. It was extremely expensive. And so I'm just curious if you could clarify that.
Well, we have, as a committee, been quite successful in identifying and pursuing grant opportunities to date. In business 3 years, I think we've attracted $198,000. We're about to hear on a $40,000 grant next month, and we just submitted a grant for $15,000. But no. So no, I was just bringing you in context that we are very, very aware of grant opportunities and we pursue them. For instance, last month, I clipped the headline, the governor has succeeded in getting a $1.8 billion transportation bond act. And there's a set aside of some, I forget the number now, 700 or 800 million for rural districts. We have, under this administration, I'm not promoting the administration, but Governor Healy created something called the Rural Development Office and hired a woman by the name of Ann Goby, a former state senator from this area. She was the principal speaker at our November conference on economic growth for town center. We have a relationship with her. She is the one who oversaw our getting the $50,000 and $25,000 grant to hire these professionals to come in and help us think through what can we pull together to present to the community, get feedback, input, comments, and work together to identify what needs to be done. I can imagine the $7 million sewer issue. We need to identify that, the source and the process, and pursue it. It may take, that's why this is a 10-year vision. It may take 10 years to fix this road or this sewer issue or this traffic issue, but we have to start somewhere. And so we're proactive, we're organized, we want to come up with a solution that the town would embrace and then make it happen. Not to step over, but a lot of issues in town are reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to work with the community to say, here are some challenges, here are some opportunities, here's the plan. So I can't give you a specific other than we do our homework. The $1.8 billion under the administration, the person in charge of it was the keynote speaker at our conference. We developed a relationship with her. She wants to see the vision succeed. We're not finished forming that vision. This conversation will build to that process.
I'll just quickly note from a transportation standpoint some of the next steps that we proposed: a conceptual design study and something like pre-25% design, which is an engineering term to say we're designing this up to a 25% standpoint. That's a six-figure expense. It may be in the high six figures. That is generally something that the Commonwealth is looking for cities and towns to not so much, pony up themselves, but look for municipal resources to demonstrate a commitment to an idea stemming from that. Construction for something like corridor reconstruction for Main Street for a half mile or a mile in length with some new intersection treatments. That's generally something that, while running in several millions of dollars, a funding program like MassWorks would generally fund for municipalities. It is very rarely taken on by municipalities themselves. I'll also say that at the end of the day, we're talking about a half mile to mile stretch of roadway that is, I don't know how many miles of roadway are within Groton itself, but all of them require, 100? All of them require constant maintenance, repaving every so often, so on and so forth, while maybe on a per foot basis, Main Street requires a little bit more than that. It is still just a fraction of the total expenses for a DPW for a town's roadway system.
Yes, so I just wanted to highlight again the importance of historic preservation in the town center, and I know that's already in discussion, but particularly when I was looking at some of the drawings of the vision, which I understand the goals behind, but there were some buildings that sort of took away from the historic character, and I think any new development needs to sort of highlight the historic buildings and not stick out. That's the big thing. Because to make a new building look like it's old is usually prohibitively expensive, and besides, we already have gorgeous architecture that we want to show off. So like when we mentioned I think the height restriction was mentioned at one point. So when we talk about Town Hall being tall or Joni's house being tall, those are buildings that are historic that we want to be highlighting, versus new building, not so much. So it's probably not the best idea to just drop the height restriction for that reason. So just focusing on historic preservation above making it more dense in the center.
So I guess to answer your question, it's not our intention to have Groton pay for this. Okay.
Mr. Hess, I wondered if you could elaborate a bit on the cultural district study, or with the note. I mean, that was a new concept to me, and I don't know how many other people in the room. Yeah, cultural district studies or establishments. What's the objective there? It seemed from what you said that. Thank you very much. Thinking about events seemed to be an important part of that. Events means more visitors, means more bathrooms, means more parking space. That might not be exactly what we want, but we do have cultural activities already in town that are not yet well integrated. I think that was the motivation of this committee's genesis, was we have a new cultural center brought to town only opened less than 2 years ago, or about 2 years ago. So anyway, what's the comment?
Thank you. So the cultural district is specifically through the Mass Cultural Council. They designate a cultural district. Maynard is one. Tim was part of getting that to happen. It's actually a really cool thing. You're put on a map. You are designated as such. You get $15,000 a year for 10 years towards cultural activities. And it adds to the gravitas of being a cultural destination. So right now, Judy Romatelli and I and Julie Platt are actively looking at applying to become part of Main Street and a little bit of Hollis Street to be designated a cultural district.
That doesn't include the Groton Hill Music.
We're working on that. We're trying to get a square, quite frankly. We don't know if we can get that much called into the culture. We don't know yet. We're still working with this.
Massive cultural center in Groton today. It's not Hollis. It's not even Main Street. It's over there on Old Air Road.
It's part of it. It's part of it. But anyway, that's the benefit. And if I understand correctly, is that?
I think that's absolutely a benefit of cultural district status and the achievement of cultural district status. Let me answer the other part of it, because I don't want to dispute your questioning whether that's got enormous value. I think it makes sense to question that. The point that feels to me really important is the way, in my direct experience in Maynard, maybe it would help to put a finer point on it. My perception, and I believe I'm not the only one, I think it's shared by some of the folks on the Destination-Groton committee, is that we've got a well-articulated, well-reasoned set of aspirations, goals, visions that have been sitting largely untapped for 18 years since the Station Avenue overlay district was adopted. Few little bits of fits and starts have attempted to breathe a little life into those ideas. Those ideas are on the books. Those don't have to be promoted, by this group here tonight. That overlay district exists. One of the ways I've thought about trying to participate in this effort over the last several months is to ask, why hasn't it worked? Why hasn't the intended kind of development come about? One of the ways that I've come to see is an answer to that, is that the way the community talks about an overlay district is through talking about real estate and building heights and building styles and whether we have the sewage capacity and whether we like what a building looks like. It's easy and intuitive and normal and human to be scared of those things and to feel like they're not helpful, they're not the town we want. What's wrong with the town we've got? We moved here for that reason. And the examples I try to give in Maynard show that even though we had a overlay district, a zoning district in place, using the broad strokes fundamentally identical to the one that's in place here in Groton, the two building examples I showed demonstrate that district failed to give the town what the district was meant to create. And then the cultural district came to be. That effort, in some sense, because the people that have that conversation are engaged and active in the community. They're talking about the identity of the town. What does it mean to live here? What are we afraid of? What are we proud of? the achievement of the cultural status has the kind of value that Joni described, and I don't disagree with. But the value to the possibilities for growth are that the process, the Commonwealth's process, forces you into a really robust and rigorous kind of soul searching as a community to say, what is our identity? What are the things that we're proud of? Why would we want people to come here? Do we want people to come here? That stuff happens really well under the heading of a cultural district conversation, and it's just difficult and awkward to have that conversation as a zoning conversation. But once the district, the cultural district was embraced and understood, people began to see it as the kind of reciprocal of the overlay district, and they began to, when they hear about zoning, they began to recognize, oh yeah, this is the kind of physical infrastructure and placemaking that allows the identity and the kind of allows us to be the town we want to be. That's the point I tried to make about it.
And I appreciate it, and I had some feeling of that. My concern is that I don't understand how we get that community-wide sense of we want to have a higher cultural level. We want not just a district, or at least a significant part of our town, to be aware of and involved in cultural activities, not just commerce, not just traffic, not just visitors, but actual interesting and valuable and attractive cultural activities. I didn't see tonight's presentation. We skimmed over that in passing. You were the only one who mentioned it. That's why I directed my question to you. I don't understand how it works. Joni's answer to me was it gets us on a map and it gets us $15,000 a year. That didn't answer my question. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be disrailing and disruptive or even pushing back that hard. I'm looking for how can we go forward with the challenges we have. And as I said just minutes ago, the major, biggest cultural center in Groton today is not included.
I hear you.
It's not included. It's not on Main Street. It's not in anything, any map that was presented
But designing a cultural district
Yeah.
is a process.
Right.
And the boundaries are still attempting to
Okay,
be
but I'm
defined.
saying-
And Joni mentioned that the hope is expanding it so that the music center is included.
Has to be.
Yeah, no, we get that. So,
Okay.
but this, again, you're helping all of us articulate what it is.
I hope.
And you just helped. Let me take a moment and describe. We just went through a process in the last 2 weeks or month working with Josh Vollmer and the Historical Commission Chair Aubrey Thiel. We were approached to work on an application before something called the Society of the Cincinnati, which is a Revolutionary War legacy organization. You have to prove that your relative participated in the Revolutionary War. Last year, we were able to get a grant to finance a walking tour by Josh of historic buildings on Main Street and outside of Main Street. There's about 16 of them, I think, right now. So we were then approached very recently of trying to take that concept of an audio tour that if you go to the Destination-Groton website, you can click on and you hear, you walk by a house and it describes the history and the contribution of that house to the Revolutionary War. And Josh approached us if we would help put together an application for physical signage that would be placed in front of these houses. And we just submitted that. It's a $5,000 request. Destination-Groton is going to put $3,000 into it should we win. But that's helping under the category of history, arts, and culture. That's an example of what we're trying to think through to showcase the town as a destination and a celebration that I like to kid and say, you know, Revolution 250th is coming up and everybody thinks of Lexington and Concord. Well, it should be Lexington, Concord, and Groton. The level of contribution to the Revolutionary War is serious. And so we're thinking about those things and those opportunities all the time, and that's just one example.
Thank you. I mean, I think cultural and historic, we have a historic district. I don't know that it's adequate and it couldn't be improved, but we have one, a cultural district. I'm hoping and looking for ways that we increase the enthusiasm of the population of the town to make changes, to make it a more pleasant, more convenient, and more diverse place to live. And if a cultural district would do that, my question was, how does it do that? How do we go about getting that? And what do we expect if we go about pursuing it?
You just helped define the visionary process that has begun tonight.
Well,
It's the give and take, it's the conversation, it's identifying ways to improve our civic pride in a way that addresses some of the public safety issues, some of the opportunities economically, that preserves the town, and just the nuance of what Josh was saying on some of the buildings. If we have 16 historic buildings currently on the audio tour, soon to have signage, we don't want to come in with a design that is opposite our historic base. So, you know, we're learning language by raising questions, and it helps us think through, well, what is it we're really trying to capture here? And if we're going to do something, our history, our culture, and the arts, our schools, and our vistas and farmland and open space, that's Groton. We have challenges around the infrastructure, and we have challenges around revenue. And we think we can work together to figure out how to capture both and improve the town. Sure.
So we talked about infrastructure, we talked about this, but we haven't talked about the businesses in town. And we talked about, I call it economic bleed, because as these other communities, start attracting more of our residents outside of our area, we're not supporting our local businesses. So I think that's one of the big steps, especially with the Point coming online and the project they have at IBM going on. So as far as a community, if we don't create an economic zone here, it's going to go out. They're going to be more opportunities. So I think that's another thing, is supporting the current businesses that are here today is just so important. Because that's going to continue to happen. So, thank you.
The cultural district designation also opens up a whole myriad of additional grants, sizable grants. So that's why we're pursuing it.
Thank you for coming tonight. This is very important. We learn a lot to hear from you. The next step is keep you engaged. Come to the next meeting. Come to all 4 of them if you wish.
And when they are?
October 1st here, October 8th at Groton Wood, and October 15th at Prescott Community Center. So we're hoping to ignite the passion around our love for this town. What are its challenges and what are some of the opportunities? If we can do that as a community, we will benefit. Thank you for coming tonight.